Hello, man. Hope you're all doing well today. Let me see how my sound check is. Hello, man. Okay, sounds a little weak, but I can fix that as we go. So some of you probably noticed right now I changed my my avatar name, and that's just the way it is. And that's it. That's it. Today we're going to talk a little bit about objectivism. Most of the time when you talk about objectivism, you're talking about Ayn Rand's sort of philosophy, but in our realms, around the men realm, the male realm, we're going to talk about objectivism and sort of subjectivity to the entire manosphere and the entire collection of philosophy and stuff like that. I see I'm not getting nobody here, so that's okay. That's okay. It's going to be a little bit of a process transitioning with my name and everything, and I'll get to see if YouTube's actually doing their job, which I'll have to take an objectivist stance on that and fix that for myself. So there's what is objectivism? Objectivism pretty much is a philosophy of self-interest. A philosophy of self-interest is interesting because it kind of goes down the roads of the male philosophy nowadays. When you look out over the realm of the world, what's good for me, rather than the struggle between altruism, doing what's right for my community, doing what's right for me, sometimes placing me at the bottom of what's right for my community or behind a lot of people. Objectivism is pretty interesting when you think about it that way. What is the male objectivist? What is the four main tenets or pillars? Metaphysical, objective reality. What is metaphysical and what is objective reality? That's pretty easy. Most of the time we've already went down those threads of what is metaphysical and what is objective reality for myself. Objective reality for myself is I have to live in this house. I have to provide for myself food, water, clothing, warmth, some income, things like that. Metaphysical reality would jump into the realms of spiritual awakenings, what I believe in, what my mind's eye sees about the world, what the inner theater tells me about the world. So in a sense, Descartism kind of plays in this I think, therefore I am sort of stuff. And the metaphysical aspects of it sometimes become hard to untangle with the physical aspects, or what I would refer to the corporeal assets or the uncorporeal assets. What is real, what is not real, what is thought, what is speech. Speech is sound reverberations from our diaphragm to articulate certain things as we articulate certain desires onto the world, to the community. Anytime you include other people, you include a community. So but that's kind of contrary in itself to objectivism, because it's all about me. What do I send out into the world with myself, my agency? And that's the question. It has a lot to do with agency and myself, how much agency I push into this world. The metaphysical can sometimes rely on or the physical can sometimes rely on the metaphysical. I go to church. I get some sort of authority through that from the church. Say I'm a youth pastor, or they give me a job and I have a meaning in life that could be very useful for myself through a metaphysical idea of whatever God you have. Most of the time, Rand will say, or anybody that's doing objectivity or objectivism, which isn't really a word, but we'll just use it. It's an ism. So the metaphysical can sometimes it can sometimes lead to physical enhancements to my world spiritually. Or if I just like to go to some church here or there, or there, or there, or there, or there, just to watch the choir because it sounds nice and it makes me feel good every Sunday morning, that could have a physical and and so I wouldn't say spiritual because I really don't believe in a lot of the spirits. You get a physical communal thing that I do that makes me feel better, which adds to some kind of plus in my life. And I like to look at these things objectively, like there's a plus in my life or there's minuses, things that take from my life, things that enhance my life. And so we have to look at what I just did, the epistemology of reason. What I have to reason through these things. What's good for me? What's not good for me? How much am I willing to push my agency out into this world? What am I willing to say about myself? What am I willing to reveal about myself? And we could look into psychological studies of these things, and we can look into say the Jakarta window, and what am I willing to reveal? What am I not willing to? What do people know about me? What do I only know about myself? So I have to dissect these things, and I have to use reason. And when people come to me with requests or anticipations, and I'll always say one of the things in my life, no expectation, no disappointment. I don't place unfair expectations on people, places, things, or objects. So I reason through these things, and usually I do a Boolean logic method on those things, the ands, the ors, or nots. If it's just good for me, I get up, I'm walking down the hallway, and it's just good for me to wash up and use the bathroom, and that would be a decision. That would be I have to do. I can go down the hallway, get my coffee, or I can go this way and make myself feel a little better, and then get to the coffee. And there's a series of decisions that need to be made at that point, and you do this all day. I always say humans are intrinsically special to animals. We're intrinsically we have higher IQs. We're brighter. We form 150 million syllogisms. The lowest IQ human forms 150 million syllogisms in his head during his lifetime, and he uses a lot of these in single moments. And this is Joe's theory of 11 seconds of my life. Sometimes people don't look at 11 seconds of their own life so they can write it down, so they can see how these things work out, the ands and ors and nots of things. I'm carrying my groceries. I give this story a lot. I'm carrying my groceries, and just try to remember everything you did for that 11 seconds of your life and see where your ands, ors, or nots, your decisions worked out. You'll realize that there was a series of decisions and sometimes an executive command. The executive command is people's other influences on you. Somebody walked in, I got the groceries in my hand, somebody's walking out the door, I'm walking in, that makes an influence on my life. I have to do it. They're imparting an executive command on how I'm going to do this. I have to do this. There's reasons why I have to do this. I can't walk through them. I must walk around them, or I must force my way through, things like that. We do these introspections into our what is good for us and what is not good for us at a moment's notice. And we can do 11 seconds. The next time you're carrying the groceries in there into the house, do those. Where do I put the groceries? Am I going to put one here, or am I going to put one here? Am I going to start unloading? Do I just drop them on the floor? Why is the kitchen cabinet open? If I leave it open, I bump my head on there's a lot of decisions based on pragmaticism too, that if I leave these doors open and I'm bending over, I often pop myself on the head, and that hurts. I don't want to do this. I want to do one thing at a time. That would go back to how I pack my groceries at the store. Do I pack them in areas where I can leave one and this thing becomes very complex. What's best for me? What's best for Joe as I reason through these things daily, on a daily, the epistemology of reason. It goes far back, it goes forward into time, and it'll go backwards into time and forwards, because you're backwards to this. I understand that now. So the ethics of it, how far am I willing to push it? What ethical boundaries do I have in my self-interest? The politics of it is usually, I take a very neutral stance on the politics of it. Some will say capitalism is a politic. I don't think it's a politic. It's being self-aware of you. You have, there's resources. I need some of those resources, and I need to buy or sell some of those resources. I need to get some of these resources because I have bills, and those are politics too. Why do you have bills? You start asking yourself these questions. I have bills because I live in a greater community. If I didn't live in a greater community, I would not have bills, but I chose to live in a greater community. Now, do you see how these decisions work into that? Some people say, "Oh, going Galt," and that's all about. It's about the male, and the male decision, and that's what we want to talk about. These decisions will have effects on your past. They won't have effect. Your past life will have effects on your life now into the future. We have to cut some of these things sometimes. And the Randian hero, we look at the Randian hero. He made a sever in his life. And that's what MGTOW or some of the manospherian things for the male objectivity through male agency would tell us to do. And I think we look at that Wittgenstein and we look at Winninger at this point, and we go. Winninger says through his studies from Wittgenstein that every male makes a decision to make segments in his life, to give so much time to a segment of an enterprise. I'm doing this for so much time. Either it's a failure, or it's either it's going to be a failure, and I'm going to learn to live with that, and I have to cut that at a certain point, or it's going to be useful, but I may still have to cut that at a certain point, at a certain time, and move on to the next step of these things. Men live through steps. We throw things out. We forget about these things that we did in the future. You have these steps that you're going to work. That's why these the Randian theory or the Descartesian theory, they all work together with others. Wittgenstein, Winninger, Hobbes, all those guys. They all had some parts to play in this. How we think, explaining to us our emotions, and emotions being the metaphysical part. If the best thing someone ever said to me about emotions is they're not real. Say, Joe. These things that you feel. I was experiencing a panic attack where things got overwhelming one time, and he says, "Calm down, everything's fine. What you're feeling is not real. Get back in the moment, and let's push through this, and let's use the real." That's real objectivism there. Objectivism works out in some things, because I was thinking about myself. I was thinking how to get through this thing. The metaphysics sometimes does not matter. You have to throw that away. You have to reason yourself through that. The ethics of how I'm going to do it, there was an ethical decision there too. When you think about, there's an ethical decision that I'm going to be useless to the rest of society right now if I keep going on about this, the ruminating about this panic I'm having about certain things happening to me. And those go back to there's some things I can't control in my life. Other people influence my life. I like to control everything, but that's just not going to happen. So I have to look at my self-interest. And that's the hardest part for men, because men are naturally altruistic beings and everything. Let me go back to the page and see if anybody there. Hello, Mike. Hello, Riff. Hello, Silent Sage, and everybody that's in. Today we're going on about objectivism a little. We're going to talk about philosophy in these next few segments of my life here. We're going to talk about my decision probably to omit the name and use a new name here and everything, about what works out for me, what works out. At a certain point, certain things don't work out for me. I have to change it. I, as a person, have to change. It's my responsibility. It's your responsibility to change things, and nobody else is going to help me. There's not some crew of magic leprechauns out there that are going to help me out in this world. A lot of guys get confused at that point. I'll take on a female, and then she will be my partner, and she will help me out. She will act in her own self-interest. Brifault's determines that. Men forget to act in their self-interest. Objectivism about these things, always act in your self-interest, and that's a part of being it's a part of the male experience, and it's a part of a new male experience that you can call a manospherian experience, you can call a MGTOW experience, you can call a just a human male experience, but it's coming to a point where it's part of all of our experience, all of your experience as a male and even as a female too. I don't say these things as a misogynist or anything. I just want to describe the through the male point of view, because that seems to be the thing that doesn't make it into this world. It never pushes this agency into existence because it seems to be not allowed to push its agency into existence. And that's when we see the scuffle between the gender dynamics of this. The gender dynamics centers, I mean, we've got two genders, and there's always going to be some dynamics between these two genders, and there's going to be a push and shove, and it's mainly for power, and it's mainly for who gets to stand on top of who's the king of the mountain for the short period of time where they can keep king of the mountain going. We can sensibly articulate these things in scientific terms all day long and everything, but the truth of the matter is it's just simply about a power dynamics between the genders and the gender dynamics and how we can work together with these things and everything. And I've learned a lot lately in my existence here in MGTOW. I've learned that being a nice guy most of the time is not going to get you anywhere. I've learned a lot in the last few days. I was just in awe of the stupidity of the YouTube universe, and how much I was really censored. And so at a certain point, I have to make a decision that's best for myself. And do I want to live in this bubble inside this onion, tucked way down inside the way down inside the onion of YouTube, where no existence can be had? No, I don't want to do that for us. So I have to start making logical decisions, which lead up to the point of my self-interest, and my self-interest is imperative to me. I would like to be that altruistic person that just, I do this because I'm totally altruistic all the time. But I found that to be I find objectivism to rule these ideas sometimes, and then it's not often fair either. Most of the time in life, things aren't fair. They just happen because we live in a world of chaos. We live in a world of entropy. Things to crumble, things go away. This house, these people, everything. My beautiful looks, I know, are eventually going to fade. And there's always alternative outlets to put your videos on. Yeah, other alternative outlets. And I can't make it here. I've just come to this conclusion that I can't make it. I can't do this. I don't demand a lot, but I do demand just, a marginal amount of help from YouTube, which I don't get. And so I have to think about those things. And then there was a very good lesson, I think Joe Buddy and a couple of us talked about yesterday, and I seen something that happened. I was like, wow, wow. Pretty much on YouTube, all you have to be is you just got to pick a subject to stir up everybody, and be a white nationalist or or homophobic or something like that. I'm not those things. I've never were those things. You pick a subject like that, and boy, instant popularity. You will get instant popularity with the lunatic fringe out there, and there's a lot of them. But I refuse to. You know what I refuse to do? I refuse to do public recantations, and I've talked about public recantations a lot. We look at guys like. We'll look at guys like, say, the Amazing Atheist and stuff. And I think his public recantation about his misogyny came when he inserted banana up his back end on a on a YouTube video and said, "Oh, I'm sorry for all the things that men have done in the past. Now, I'm not going to apologize for all the things been done in the past, because that's a haystack. I'm going to always take blame for that if I go down that road. That's a haystack of pins and needles. And if we have to apologize for everything, every war men have ever had, every decision men have ever made, I would say go back, put yourself in that position, and ask you if you would have did anything other than what they did. So I'm not going to apologize to that. The world is a cruel place, and when you're fighting with muskets and swords back in the day over resources, there are certain things that had to happen. And even Stalinism, when I look at Stalinism and Leninism and Marxism as one, the end process, Marx said, was Stalin, Joseph Stalin. When you look at what Joseph Stalin, oh, it's horrendous. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that, and all that. But would you have made any other decision for the country based on the country's needs and interests? And he was practicing objectivism when he did this. He says, Joseph Stalin is not his real name. That's Iron Man. Stalin means Iron Man. And Joe Iron Man. He walked back from the gulags 3 times with no boots on. They created the gulags to put guys like him in. And when I look at Russia at that time, Russia was moving from a traditional economy, which is farming and with human farming machines, meat machines, which we'll call them meat machines, which Varnicket coined that. It wasn't somebody else. They said somebody else coined that the other day, the meat machines things. No, that was Varnicket and Breakfast of Americas. We're all human meat machines, and we're looking at the machines, and then we got new machines, and that's the era of industrial. The industrial era was coming. Joseph Stalin looked up and he's like, man, poor mother Russia is 40 years behind the United States. Now, 40 years behind the United States and Japan and China and all these other nations that grabbed hold of the Industrial Revolution, you're behind. And immediate changes have to be made for your self-interest and their self. And these people that wouldn't get on board at that time, there were immediate reactions to that. And I don't blame them, because I would have probably did the same thing. So complain all you want, but put yourself in those shoes. There are men that had to do horrible, harsh things. And we can look at almost every war. We can look at almost every situation. We can look at Mark Antony to Joseph Stalin to Patton. And then we can say, oh, if we hold them responsible for these things of the past and these haystack of garbage that had happened, and we hold ourselves responsible for that, then it's just not going to work. It's just if I'm responsible for every mistake Patton and Stalin and Marcus Antony ever made, then I'm setting myself up for failure in this lifetime, and I don't go down those lines. So today we're going to just critique objectivism and look at the the view of objectivism from the male point of view, or a MGTOW or a Manispherian point of view, and we'll look at the Randian hero, the idea of what is John Galt was the Randian hero, but what he was he's a fierce avatar, what I call a fierce avatar. He's that guy that he got qualities. He's just and I want you to remember in these books, there's a difference between female philosophy in America. When Mary Wollstonecraft wrote Mary was written from a fantasy fiction point of view. When Ayn Rand wrote The Fountainhead and wrote Atlas Shrugs, it's from a fantasy fiction point of view, where she introduces the ideal man as John Galt, or the other one, that this is a man who perseveres to achieve his values. And so it's an idea. So we are in, anytime, this is where objectivism kind of sways for me. So from the beginning of Randyism, we're looking at a situation that is in the metaphysical, and then she denies the metaphysical. which seems to be, and this will show up later in Rand's life when Rand could not live by the rules she had set up in her life and her marriage. When she was later, her husband was her husband was still probably, like me, hitting his peak prettiness, and she had hit the wall. So Rand is a good idea of a philosophy of a person hitting the wall, and then she started going into depression, and she couldn't live with the ideas, the ethos of what she had put out there, whether what's natural, what's objective, and what was meta ethical, and all those things. So her philosophy in itself didn't hold up for Rand herself, and I find that philosophy, the objectivist philosophy, a lot of times the objectivist philosophy is not going to hold up to the world standards just because of chaos. You have chaos in your life, and it's like I said, when you look at it in all these ways and all these things that's going to happen, the egotism and everything, you're still going to have what I call the executive command on your life. The executive command is a series of ands, ors, or nots that come into your life and force you to do something other than walking straight. I'm walking straight with my bag of groceries. I want to get through the door and somebody else come. That's an executive command. It's going to force me into making other decisions. Now, when that goes out into the world and you're forced to make other decisions, are you responsible for the decisions that you made that were forced by other people? I'll often say I never made a mistake in my life unless it was involving somebody else's input to my life. It's almost impossible for a male to make a mistake in his life unless it's input from something else. It's input from altruism. Do I get out of the way? I'm altruist. Do I hold the door while I'm holding my bag of groceries, which might lead me to drop my bag of groceries? I'm doing something altruistic. I'm holding the door. If I drop my groceries, that's an input into my life that has cost and it has effect on me. And it's that thing that I was talking about, that executive command from the gods. I don't know where these commands come from. I can't attribute for all the chaos in life and everything. I don't know where they come from some days. Things happen. There's entropy. There's decay. There's chaos. There's egotism. There's narcissism. You're going to have to deal with all these things every day in this world, and they're going to make how you would normally walk through your day. It's going to make you do things differently. You're going to sway indifferently. Now, in the Randian, there was this thing she called, it wasn't the Manque Man, but the LQE or the MQE. It was intuition. When I look at how my day's gone, and sometimes I'll say I'm either 50 miles ahead of myself or I'm 50 miles behind myself, and I got to get back to even. And that's just me taking a check on if I find myself too far out of whack during a day, I have to put an end to that. And that's that agency I have to throw into the world. And at a certain point, MGTOW is about the no. It's no, the not gate, that last gate that I talk about, the important gate in MGTOW. When your objectivist ethics say that you're too far out of bounds and you have to put a stop on these things. Boom, I put a stop on these things, and that's with very little interest for people around me. I say, no, I can no longer go. We see children. Sometimes things get out of hand, and they're going along with the crowd. They're going along with what's happening. They're riding the whirlwind. Now we have two competing philosophies with this, and the other one was off the top of my mind. Blah blah blah. Somebody else writes about it. Varnicket writes about it. Varnicket writes about a philosophy which people just go with things sometimes. I'll say, being seriously, if it's a summer day and the guys go, hey, let's go to the beach. I'm not ready. I'll just go with this and see where it takes me. Sometimes you're going to meet other people. You can have other experiences. That would be what Varnick would call just going with people. And it's the philosophy. I'll remember this at a certain point. It's a different kind of philosophy. But at a certain point, the objectivist atheists say, stop. No, I'm turning off the water. I'm turning off everything in my life right now until I get back on track, until I can find that freaking road back home. And that's what I really want to do. I want to find that freaking road back home, stop everything, make some decisions. And if I'm chasing a job, or if I'm chasing something too hard and it stops working for me, if A doesn't no longer line up with B, which goes back to A, and the shortest path between those 2 points gets very, very straight, I'm putting an end to it. And that's the not gate. So we discussed the and, the or, and the not, and the things that can happen. And there is only 3 things that can happen in this world. It's a part of what I call natural science. It's like 46 chromosomes. There's 26 proteins that make up a human. Without one of them, we wouldn't exist. You look out into the ether, or you can look out into the how this world was formed, and ands, ors, and nots, electrical frequency is all very well determined in our lives, and things. We don't look at electric as a way to determine these things, but it is a very good way to determine these are the ways things work in the life. And it's without these things working this way, natural, none of us would exist. So there are boundaries to this thing, and that's a good idea to understand. Once you place these boundaries into your life, these moral theorems, moral theorems in your life, that you understand there are boundaries to the human male, and there are boundaries to the limits, which I can press ethics without having to go to jail, at least. But getting up to that point where I know these, I used to know them very well, and I used to be able to press that thing very well when I was young and full of piss and vinegar, or not even as I was 30 into my 40s, when I had a little more experience on how to deal with people. I know where to push the boundaries of logic. Nothing is an exact science, and these things are things that you're going to have to learn. Practicing objectivism is very good for a young man. It's an open male to male subject. We have a lot when we talk about these things. What's good for me? What my capitalist intentions on this thing are. I'm going to make some money. I'm going to do this. I'm going to push this thing through. I'm going to lend my agency to it, and that's what I have to do to make money. You can see all these things start lining up. I can become an entrepreneur and everything, and the captain of my own ship, pretty much. Now that's something we start looking into. Becoming the captain of your own ship is what they're talking about in objectivism. Now you can go into the realm of the slave mentality, start working for somebody else, become part of the farm and everything. You lose your agency when you do that. You lose it entirely. You lose your agency when you start doing it, and that's the philosophy of the manosphere of MGTOW and everything. You start losing your agency. Your altruism is overruling. I got to take care of the kids. I got to take care of the wife. I got my family members. The families, and lately I've been watching Ray Donovan. It's a great movie if you want to see about a family out of an Irish family, and I can relate to this Ray Donovan, how he's just sitting there some days with this blank look on his face, staring off into the ether or the middle distance with nothing more than a blank look, and there's no thought, because that's where he needs to take himself to some days, after having to deal with the ridiculousness of how he thinks. But I don't know how it's going to end, or how he thinks about it. And there's always these happy-go-lucky, Hollywood influences that love rules all and all that. And that's not very objectivist. That is not very them things, if you're making those decisions on love rules all, and you're not making those decisions for yourself, you're setting yourself up for failure, because in no way, shape, or form has love filters into an and, an or, a not. That's when you start getting executive commands. Uh, and the concepts, they'll become quite, you see this a lot. I see this a lot with objectivists too, when they're trying to navigate outside of the realm of MGTOW, and they're trying to navigate love interests and other people and altruism, and how far I should go that, and what's the benefits of marriage, and what's the pitfalls of marriage and everything. They do this cognitive thinking that I just explained. This cognitive, they're willing to take it to a certain extent, but they're not willing to give up this stuff, which they know, and they live in this world of a milk apple, we used to call it, and it's this absurd world of milk apple that two things mean the same, two opposite things mean the same thing, and they're willing to tell everybody in their life that these two opposites are in fact the same thing. Nor are they bad, or nor are they good. We'll just ignore them things, and we'll let these intrusionalistic executive commands run my life, and then wherever I land at the end, hey, I can always use egotism and describe it as as I get another chance at this, and I'll take that other, I'll get right back on that horse and stuff like that. And we can see them doing that, what I would call as reductionism. They'll do reductionism, and this way we get Descartes again, doing Descartism. We're doing the reductionism to make everything okay in my mind, because there was this cognitive dissonance on what I really had to do. And we see this a lot with objectivists. I have to live in the world which I have, in which I live in, and I think there I am. So marriage is just a part of reality in this thing, and they'll accept it as a part of reality. And then comes in the cognitive dissonance in your head. You're altruistic. You have to be. You're forced to be altruistic. There's a forced altruism in that, and then you start mowing down this Prager University idea of objectivism, where you're making up all these fake analogies for how great marriage is and that stuff, and really, it's just costly to a male. It's just costly, and it will never be anything but costly, and that's it. And that's it. And it depends, how much are you willing to give? I think of the guy from Amazon right now, Jeff Bezos, is coming to that point in his life where he's like, okay, now how much am I willing to give? That's what it'll be at the end. And that's just the truth. Entropy is important. It is not a change banality. Take hold of, and things rot. Yes, things rot. Things go away. Things end. Entropy can go from, from just, a pole stuck in the beach of a tide coming in, and that pole eventually just fall over and rot away. And that's life. Everything's entropy. Even your very existence, your like I say, all this prettiness someday is going to go away, and that's a good experience in life, and that's something good to know, because we'll take that to John Locke. And when John Locke was arguing, he was arguing in front of Congress, or whatever that was at that time, Parliament, about what to do with disabled people, what to do with people like this. And he said, remember, with time will make us all disabled. And it was a good thing to know. And we see a lot of these objectivists, and I often see objectivists, they're anti-Social Security, they're anti-tax and everything. But the pragmaticism of life is, with time, we all become disabled. And if some of this chaos visits you, like it visited me during the years, and there's always chaos, There's always chaos, and marriage will be that chaos that will visit you. It'll leave you flat, broke, and busted. It'll leave you flat, broken, busted, and then after that, they'll go, "Well, what did you do with it, with all your money? You should be able to take care of yourself." And then I say, "Well, okay, I paid into a social security system, and then if a man gets his hand chopped off at work, he paid into the social security." This sort of entropy, or this sort of the chaos that comes in your life, it's going to happen to each one and every one of us at a certain point. So don't pretend like these objectivists do that that's not going to happen. You have to be in reality. You have to stay in reality. And this is where I veer from the objectivist philosophy. When you're young, when you're handsome, when everything's going great, all this shit is great. But like I say, it's marriage. Marriage is great right up to that point where she says, "I'm unhappy." Then it affects the rest of your life. So if you had 6 years of a great marriage, you got 3 kids now, and she says, "I'm unhappy." Now that's going to affect the rest of your life. Do you see how that worked? In a moment, she made an executive command, which thugs from the state are going to come and enforce those executive commands upon you. And they're going to tell you some pretty silly stuff too at that point, but that's going to affect your whole life. And that's traumatic. And it's man, it's almost like that can end at a certain point. So keeping with your basic objectivism about marriage and everything would be but most of these guys, they do reductionism after they do introductionalism. Introductionalism being they're going to introduce certain policies from those threads. They'll go, "Oh, this, I can get married or I can't get married." And that's a similar, them are two of the same things. No, they're not the same things. You're making a decision and they're not going to work out the same ways. Women plan for divorce well in advance. Yes. Yes, we know Brifault's law. We know they plan for divorce well in advance. Most males are shocked at that moment. I know that look on the stupid look on my face. I look at one of those, what happened? You lied to me. And that's why I say no expectation, no disappointment. I was expecting that this worked out this way, like I was told. I didn't know it wasn't going to work out that way, but I expected all the logic points to match up because I had made a logical decision. And I expected it to run to a true, but the chaos in that was at any moment she could change her mind with that 6-shooter she's been given by the government. And that 6-shooter is what we talk about, a Walt. That's a 6-shooter. And that a Walt 6-shooter that will anything you got planned, anything you got going, it puts all that it throws all that into chaos. And we have to remember these things as males. So when we practice objectivism, we must do the rational thinking, and that's what it's about, the Randian rational thinking. And they say they're going to do this rational thinking, but when it comes down to the part about what I want, the biology of what I want and what I desire sometimes overrides. We can see this with the simp male. We can see this with the backstabbing white knight, or the cackling hyena, we call him, that guy that wants to take your place. This is a false objectivism which they portray to themselves. Your desire and your wants have nothing to do with how this thing really works in this world. We go back to the arguments, the Randian arguments, and the premises which these things base themselves on. Is it 100% rational? Can a person live with this rational ability? Would have been the effect. Therefore, whatever promotes my life. Therefore, life is nothing else is valuable other than for my own sake. Anything, anything, it's based on gains and what I can keep and the values of those things and the values which I keep. What do I value and stuff like that? If this chaos is coming in, and I find that these things are untrue, did I somehow promote that? No, stick with your original values on these things. We all know the percentages. These percentages aren't going to change just because you wish them to change. Now, wishing things to change, you're putting yourself into the metaphysics of that. It's magic thinking. Desire is magic thinking. Wishing these things would change is praying for them to change is magic thinking. My hopes and my dreams is all metaphysical. That's magic thinking, which if you fall down that line, man, you're not being very objectivist at all. You're being, well, what I would concern as you're being an anti-rationalistic person, and you're religious. And there's really no negative connotations out there or negative. Well, what happens when you become too religialistic and you start believing in proud ponies and unicorns, and you think you're going to be walking through the woods down there, and there's going to be a princess inside of a glass container and stuff like that, and she's going to be all yours, and she's going to love you for the rest of your life, because that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. These things have change involved with them, and measure your risk. And I don't know if Rand ever did anything about how to measure your risk. What would be a measurement of too much risk? Does it fall? We often hear the 50-50 thing when you're going into divorce. It's all 50-50. The lawyers swear by it. You know why the lawyers swear by that? It's a very rational statement when they say 50-50, because there's two people. One's going to win, one's going to lose, and that's 50-50. That's all they see. That's objectivism. What side do you want to land on this thing? How much agency do you want to put in that? You think ahead of yourself if you're going to do this. And with the laws how they are, even thinking ahead of yourself, some people would go, "Oh man, I believe in some magic piece of paper that's gonna save me. I'll just get her to sign off all of her interests at the end, and that'll be a prenuptial." I've got this beat. No, you don't. 89% of prenuptials are thrown out in the courts, and they don't mean anything because that's not how the courts work. That's not how family courts work. and you will find that out at the end. That's not how they work. Some prenuptial agreement, and that's delusion. That's working yourself down these metaphysical areas of delusion where you've convinced yourself that is how it works. And it's not going to work that way. Them are those areas which we have to guard against. Is this a true statement? Is this going to work true? Can I see this 100% of the time working out the way it should? And then I see no. My premise on that is simply no. That does not work out right. That will be a major factor in my decisions on forward from that point. 72 to 89% people, it's arguable. We'll get a divorce. Prenuptials get thrown out. The law is what the law is. And the only way that you're going to avoid these things is you never get married. You'll never get a divorce. You will, if you have children out of wedlock, have to involve yourselves in the same thing that divorced men have. But that's a different avenue. If you're out there pumping and dumping, and you come upon these rational thought that somehow that will protect you, that's another one of those metaphysical thoughts that just aren't going to work out right. So today we covered sort of the metaphysical of MGTOW, we the epistemology, the reasoning behind it, the ethics of it. Is there an ethical, the self-interest in this thing? How much are you willing to take that ethical self-interest into your regards, into your age, and produce that. And what you're really doing is you're looking at the world and you're being aware that things are around you and that I have to deal with humans. And what am I willing to do for myself at a certain point? I found that in life, when I increase that bar of ethics, when I increase or I lower my ethical values sometimes, and I get and I add agency, uh, I have to pick a certain. I don't want to go to jail, but I don't want to take all this, and I add agency and strength and force to these things. That's what usually, but it's not a combination of I just made a decision to make. We see fools all the time. They walk into a store, they made a decision to take something. I'm going to take this silver wiring, which I use. I'm going to take it and it's going to be mine. And I made this objective decision to take this silver wiring. That's my thing. And it doesn't work out. And you go, what happened there? There's a lot more threads to look at in these things. He ends up in jail for a pack of silver wiring, which was $15, and that ruined his whole life and gave him a petty theft to carry with himself for the rest. That's not objective reasoning. You look at these things. You look at these things differently when you're walking through and making these decisions. And there's other decisions that are based upon these. There's a pillar, there's a mountain, there's a haystack sometimes of decisions that you have to make on a moment's notice. That's why in my philosophy, the philosophy of Joe going into MGTOW is those and or nots at a second, at a moment's notice. You have to get in touch with these things. It's so important, and think about what you're doing. If these things start running from the lizard brain or the penile thing on the top of your brain stem, if you're running 100%, and that's what Descartes was talking about with. He was talking about that with the inner theater. If you're running everything strictly on inner theater, what worked in the past, what didn't work in the past, how many times this worked, it does always work. It'll become a natural reflex, like someone running a feather on the back of your neck. You're going like this. Did you think about going like that? Did you think about scratching yourself? No, you had no idea the feather was there. You thought your lizard brain thought it was a bug. So there was this idea sometimes even of Descartism that my brain is not my body and I'm not, and there's other things happening. My soul is something different, and I see it that way. My body told the simple reflexes within my body said there was something on my neck to shed, and I didn't even give it a thought. It just happened. When you can see your reflexes work. That would be my argument to that portion of the Descartism and everything. I can see my reflexes in action. Sometimes I make these decisions on those reflexes from experience and past experience. And we're going to get into past experience, and we start talking about pragmaticism. We'll get into pragmatism somewhere down the week here, and how pragmaticism comes into this thing. And I have this abundance of knowledge that I see objectively that happens every day. This door opens and shuts the same way, and it's going to keep doing that until the end of time. It's on two hinges. It's a very mechanical thing. My brain and my body become aware of that. What else in this world works like that? This is going to happen every single time that way. A lot of people search for that their whole life. What's going to happen every single time that way? And that's your ability to, that would be your IQ, your ability to take these things, ability to navigate and manufacture that agency into your life. And that becomes an IQ thing. That becomes a lucky. Is there luck? Yeah, there's luck. I'm not going to say there's not. Is there bad luck? Yes, I've seen people with such bad luck that it influence, and we'll talk about them down the line. I've seen people with such bad luck. Even Plato talked about people with such bad luck that it was just like, it was horrendous to watch. But I think it's because these people weren't operating on a basic operating system that says they should be in control of their ands, ors, and nots. What was a good decision? What was a bad decision? They're making bad decisions, and once chaos and entropy come on that chaos and entropy makes a bad decision into a worse decision, and that's where their life is. That's why I say this. If it seems like me at a certain time with this intuition, and a lot of philosophers talked about this intuition in different words and different terminology. If it seems like I'm out of whack, get myself back into wax, get myself back home and start afresh, start anew in my life, because that's pretty much the only, that's pretty much the only place I can start fresh and new, and that to give me the best possible way to win in whatever thing that I'm engaged in at that time. And then those sections in life that Winninger talked about, whatever I'm engaged in, let's get fresh, let's get new, let's get this thing restarted again. And we do have chaos, and a lot of times in life, man, we just have tragedy too, and tragedy and evil are not the same things. Jordan Peterson talked about this. I think it's one of his more brilliant things when we start looking at tragedy. I talked about it earlier today, about tragedy, about how people sometimes do the hyperbolic ruminations about what if tragedy comes and visits us? What if a comet comes down and smashes a school bus? It's like, yeah, those things do happen, but they're outside of the norm. And that's what we got with the argument today earlier, which set me off on thinking about life and changing my life and changing a lot of things that I do in my life and everything, because I've seen these people were reacting hyperbolically to certain things. And I had to start thinking about, man, do I do that? I don't want to be that person. What we talked about earlier with the school teachers, they're saying a school teacher, you need a nurse in the schools because, man, anaphylexia and there's head injury and everything. And I'm like, that is not the norm. Those things normally don't exist in schools. There's not a line of kids with it's like a Homer Simpson episode, a line of kids going out the nurse's office with head injuries and arrows stuck into them. That's you're making that up. That's a cartoon. But a lot of people live in those cartoon fantasies that they make up in their inner theater. I say, man, stay out of the inner theater. There are natural reactions. There's learned reactions, but stay out of those inner theaters, because that's going to screw you up all logically. Everything's going to be hyperbole. Everything's going to be a manufactured from a metaphysical space that's not corporeal. And I know, let that sink in. Let that sink in for a second. Let's do a pause for a second and let that sink in. Take the time sometimes to let these things sink in and stop. No, stop, go. And that was one of my original, no, stop, go. When I was most successful in life, my theory about everything in life that bothered me was no, stop, go. And I'd practice that, and I'd send that agency out into the world. And that worked out great for me. But that's a part of objectivism, that the reality of things that I have to clip in this world. But Icahn Eckhart Tolle, I would call it Icahn because I just like it better, I think. Eckhart Tolle talked about these things, these things that had a hold of him in this world that weren't in the now, and bad things, and I practice that in my head all the time. There's a little exercise that he gives, and it's a very, very useful exercise. He calls it looking at the myth in your brain, looking at that evil when those ruminations come, and these threads that are attached to you that make you do things. You look at it and you question it. Is that real? Are you real? And I look at these evil demons in my head, and usually, and at that point, I had a lot of demons in my head. He had a lot of demons in his head too. Once you look at them, they dissipate and they go away because they're not real. They're not real. So if you got any of those demons up there, those dragons, I often call feminism one of those dragons that we build upon, and we make it bigger than it is. Don Quixote was dealing with dragons and demons from his past and his present, and he's working those into his future. You got to live in the now, and the now is a place where you look at those things, you dissipate them. You can do that in your brain. It's a simple little exercise of looking into the me, into the now. And that would be a good starting point from anything you're going to do. I just want to say hello to all the people that actually showed up here today, Silent Sage and Doria and everything. There's been a little bit of change in my name, and my philosophy about MGTOW came. There was some reality and some disappointment in the MGTOW community, and there's some disappointment in the general overall YouTube community out there, and so I know that can only boil down to one person. That can only boil down to me, and the changes I have to make, and so I decided to change my name away from the logo, because it doesn't do me any good to stay in that spot, and I have to look into my future, and having a fan base, or having some people listen to me would be just a great thing, instead of a few loyal MGTOWs, and I don't want to put that on everybody. I appreciate everybody's loyalty, and I appreciate you for each and every one of you, but I have to do what's best for me too, and the Traversable's philosophy thing seems to be the best. It seems to be what I'm good at. It's what I'm good at in this world. I'm good at untangling metaphysical dragons. I'm good at logic. I do it at a moment's notice, and that's from being an electrician. If you're an electrician, you have to sub-dissect all that panels and get down to the untruth in a moment's notice, or else everybody in the world's going to be yelling at you. And I've done it for years and years and years and years, and I like to practice philosophy because it gets me out of that Boolean logic that I'm caught in, and it makes me feel good, and it gives me a chance to take a look at who I am and what I am, and what I become, and what was forced on me in life, and pretty much being that stern, rigid guy that always goes down to the truth at a moment's notice. And I could be very sharp at times in my philosophy. I could be very sharp with people. If the truth varies and everything, I'm very sharp, and that doesn't do me no good. So practicing a little bit of objectivism, where I can veer from those things sometimes, look at your life in a different light, and decide whether this is good for you, whether it's bad for you, whether this is this or whatever it is, or whatever it turns out to be. I don't know. I can't predict the future sometimes. I'm not a prognosticator. What does SFM say about that? I'm not a geologist. I'm not a geographer. That's what he says. How do I know? I'm not a geographer. That's being snarky, but it makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not a geographer. I don't know the future. and that's just the way things are going to have to go for me now. But I will talk this with at least once a week about philosophy, and about my philosophy, and about pragmaticism, and we'll work into Kantism, and we'll work into Descartism, and we'll work into Platoism, and we'll work into epistemology and all those things. If you want to hang around and listen to me mumble on about how Joe applies these things to life in a sensible manner, you can. And that's what this station from now on, or this channel, is going to be about. And I'm not going to waste my time on basically a burgeoning philosophy of retards that most of them don't get it, and most of them are never going to get it. Most of those TFLers, the incellers, the new guys, if they're thinking it's all about this and that and this and that, and how to put a woman back into that. They got it so wrong. They got it so wrong, and they're forgetting about one thing. They're forgetting about themselves. And anytime I see a man forgetting to put himself back into it and forgetting to use his natural agency, and men are born with natural agency because there's force behind everything we do. When you stop forcing yourself out into that world, you're destined for a humiliating end. And that's what they love. Them are them public recantations that you'll have to give in life. And those public recantations, we'll talk about the recantations someday again, about what I see on YouTube, about what I see. Even that doctor that was around the other day, and he was doing, I can't remember his name, I was complaining about him. What he was really actually doing was a public recantation to get in the good graces of the social justice community. And Jordan Peterson did that. He did a public recantation against MGTOW to get in the good graces of the social community. And in that public recantation, he was accepted. And we've seen this with Amazing Atheists. We see this with TFM. As long as you're willing to do that public recantation, or you're willing to Sandman even to a lesser degree, he's not willing to say the truth as the truth is. He does that public recantation daily, and it's a daily message of moderate MGTOW. As long as you're willing to do that publicly, the public will embrace you because you're just like them. And that's the Matrix. That's that blue pill world we talk about. You are not just like them. For people that really want to truly experience the red pill philosophy and the MGTOW philosophy and the new burgeoning philosophy of maleology that we're coming up in here. I don't care what you call it. Descartes said things and stuff. If you want to experience these things and stuff, that's good enough. And that's okay with me. But, hey, we have to live the life and natural law and apply logic to these things. And maybe that's where I can help out a little bit. And I hope I can. And with that, I don't want to let this run too long. So on on a 1 to 10 about Rand's philosophy of objectivism, I agree with Rand about 5%. About a 5. I'll give her a 5 on the philosophy scale, and we'll do that. We'll place people on a philosophy scale because her philosophy in the end it was backlash to her own self, and she couldn't hold up to the principles at the end that she had spouted all her life. Hence, blue pill. Hence, leading men down into a trap. And that's the way I think about that. So, Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand, you get a 5 on my scale of MGTOW philosophies. And that's all I got for you today. And I'll come back probably tomorrow or the next day or whatever with a different one. And we'll take a clear view at the world in which we live in. And that's the only thing which you really can do is get a clear view of the world which you live in and appropriately apply that to your life and the levels of agency that you want to put out there. Your levels of agency will assist you as a man. And that's where patriarchy theory comes from. Yes, we are forceful, and that works in this world. It's not about our maleness. It's not about our gender. It's about the ability to rise to that occasion. Any person, man, woman, child, that rises to the occasion when those things demand of them, those forceful and honest reactions to this world. Are you all patriarchs? No. You're just doing what a man would naturally do. And that's where I believe on that. There's no such thing as misogyny. So with that, I'm going to thank each and every coming by, and thanks a lot for listening to me. I know it's hard sometimes, and I'll try to make that a little more easy on your ears sometimes. And thanks a lot for coming around, and thanks a lot for being here.